If you have questions, stick them in the Q&A box. We'll get to those kind of at the end after I'll do a little bit of an introduction into the topic for today, and then introduce our panelists, and then I've got a couple of prepared questions for them. So first of all, thank you to everybody for coming here. This is a great kickoff to Women's History Month. We didn't think about that when we were planning it, but it worked out very nicely. This is our first in-person event in almost 2 years. It's been almost 2 years to the day. The last one was March 11th at Satellite 2020 in Washington, D.C. was the last time that I was in person doing that. So if we're a little rusty, apologies for that. Thank you for forgiveness in advance. I want to thank AIAA, who approached me about co-hosting this event. This is specifically with the AIAA Diversity Working Group, and I want to thank Nick Kramer from AIAA, especially for helping us out to organize this. They're sponsoring this. They're doing all the logistics for this event. So thank you very much. A little bit about myself and the Bay Area Women in Space and Aerospace. I've been in the industry for about 15 or 16 years, and about 5 years ago, I noticed that I was meeting a lot of different women from different areas around aerospace, and I didn't think that there was like a very great way for all of them to come together and get to know each other. So I reserved the common room of my condo building and sent out an email to maybe 10 people and said, bring a bottle of wine and a dish to share. And they sent it to other people. It was a very nice kind of like little gathering, little networking gathering. Somebody else wanted to host the next one. Then somebody else wanted to host the next one. And then somebody said, we should have programming, like you should have panelists, you should have a speaker. So starting in the beginning of 2017, I started having speakers, and speakers have ranged from people talking about technical topics, how is data used, how does Planet, use their data, to folks talking about negotiation and self-branding. Tonight we're going to talk about leadership and rising through the corporate ladder and the pipeline associated with that. So we were about on a quarterly basis, and then this thing called the pandemic hit. We had a couple of virtual events, some of which were like very cool. We could take advantage of being international. We had a group with New Zealand where we were calling into Rocket Lab in New Zealand. We did one with Zipline where we saw like real time in Rwanda, blood and medicine being loaded into a drone and then delivered like real time. We saw the air traffic control, things that wouldn't have actually been possible if we were doing the events in person. But this is our first event. This is a hybrid event, and thank you to everybody for coming. Those of you who are participating online, and those of you who are here today. So for the topic today, we're going to talk about, this is probably a topic I would have done in 2020, but sorry, technical things. Okay. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the McKinsey Women in the Workplace reports, they've been doing this for a couple of years now. It's a partnership with Lean In organization, which is famous because of Sheryl Sandberg and the Lean In book that she has. And the idea is to feature different aspects of women being in the workplace and try to find out, why is there a pipeline issue? How are we addressing diversity in the workplace? At the end of 2019, they released a report where they talked about the broken rung. And this is broken rung in the corporate ladder. You should all have a link to the report in the Eventbrite invitation. I do want to say that this was done for all corporations and kind of across corporate America. We know that in aerospace, it's even worse than corporate America. This kind of assumes that it's about a 50-50 split of women and men at the beginning, at the entry level. We know that that's like 12 to 25% for aerospace. I've read a couple of different reports with varying numbers. So we're already starting at a disadvantage. So just a caveat to these numbers. It's also an interesting snapshot in time because the end of 2019, before the pandemic, we've got some of the same problems and we've actually got some new problems. There's a part of the report where they say that men and women are leaving the workforce at the same rates. We know that that hasn't been true over the last 2 years and that women have disproportionately left the workplace because of, primarily childcare and losing childcare and having to take care of children in daycares or schools that have gone remote. So also a caveat and asterisk to this. But getting into the content of the report, there was both good news and bad news. The good news was that an increasing number of companies are starting to see the value of having women at the top and in leadership. The bad news is that women continue to be underrepresented at every single level of leadership. And often we're talking about the glass ceiling, but what this report found is that what's actually preventing women from reaching leadership positions is what they call the broken rung at the very bottom of the corporate ladder. So that first jump from entry level to manager is really where they've focused a lot of this report and said, that's where the problem's lying, and that leads to the pipeline problem at the top. The good news is that over the course of a couple of years that they had been doing these reports, they saw more women being promoted at the higher levels. They saw more diversity at the higher levels relative to where it had been, which was abysmal. So still abysmal, but less abysmal. But people were very focused on the top levels and not focusing on the lower levels. The report essentially says that this is the greatest obstacle to gender parity at senior levels, especially if you have equal numbers of men and women in the lower level, in the entry level. So statistics: for every 100 men that were hired to a manager, only 72 women were promoted and hired. And for women of color, that number was even worse. It was 68 for Latinas and 58 for Black women. And so that means that at the manager level, men are holding 62% of the positions. And once you get into senior VP level, it's 74% are men. So better than it had been, but still very, very disproportionate. The report highlighted 5 different ways to kind of fix and address the broken rung. The first is to set a goal for getting more women to the first level of management. That means that you need to have goals and accountability for those who are doing the promotions. Companies have been focused more at the higher level and wanting to see women at those highest levels, but they haven't been focusing their energy on that first step from entry level to manager. The second is to require having diverse candidates for hiring a promotion. Again, most companies were focused on doing that at the higher levels, but not so much at the lower levels of the company. Third, same problem. They were doing unconscious bias training at the higher levels, but not doing it at the lower levels. So introducing unconscious bias training at an even lower level for folks who are doing that first, who are involved in that first promotion. And the fourth was clear evaluation criteria. I thought this one was interesting. People weren't sure what it took to become a manager and what it would take to get to that next level. HR leaders reported, I thought this one was funny. This is a little bit of an eye chart, but you can see it in the report. HR leaders thought that the company valued achieving goals and leadership skills, and employees reported that they were more likely to think that being good at navigating politics and being well liked were valued at the company. So there's obviously a disconnect there. So clear, measurable goals. and clear criteria for how to get to the next step. And then putting more women in line to become managers, giving them more opportunities, like leadership training, sponsorship and mentorship, high profile assignments, just making sure that women got that experience that they needed. So with kind of that very clear, very concise background, I want to jump into two women and introduce two women who have navigated that at their respective aerospace companies. And I want to highlight, first of all, highlight their careers, and then ask them some questions about tips and tricks for themselves as well as companies. And then I'm going to open it up to Q&A. Again, if you're online, put your questions in the Q&A box. And we'll go from there. First, I'm going to introduce Dawn Harms, and they both are so accomplished, so this is going to be a long introduction. No, we're going to hit all the points. So we're very lucky to have both of these women with us tonight. So Dawn Harms is the Chief Revenue Officer at Momentus, which is an American in-space infrastructure company based right here in Silicon Valley. She is responsible for company growth, business development, sales, marketing, mission management, and communications. For the first 7 months of 2021, she was actually the acting CEO or interim CEO of Momentus right before they went public. So has great experience bringing a company. They did a SPAC in 2021. Right before Momentus, she was the Vice President of Global Sales and Marketing for Boeing Satellite Systems in El Segundo. And before Boeing, she was the Vice President of Sales, Marketing, and Communications for International Launch Services, which sells Proton rockets. Over 22 years that Dawn was with Space Systems L'Oreal, which is now known as Maxar Technologies, she had several leadership positions, including the Vice President of Business Development for commercial satellites. Earlier in her career, she had engineering positions at Teledyne in the design and development of hardware used for satellite communications. And that's where you kind of went through your first levels of management promotions at Teledyne, right? Yes. Dawn has a Bachelor's of Science in Electrical Engineering. We actually have 2 electrical engineers today, which I think is great. From the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And she's also on the advisory board for the College of Engineering. She's a board member for MANSAT, and she's chairwoman emeritus for SSPI and was honored as the Mentor of the Year in 2020. So thank you, Dawn, for joining us tonight. Deanna? Yes. Deanna is a 16-year veteran of aerospace, and she's currently a mission architect and the director of internal research and development, at Maxar Technologies. And at Maxar, she's responsible for architecting space system solutions and the development of future space technologies. While she's been at Maxar, she's held a variety of roles, from antenna responsible engineer, manager of the near field range, in-orbit test director, the 1300 bus product manager, and the director of cost and schedule. She's had increasing responsibilities as she's worked through all of those positions. She's the first in her family to graduate from high school and graduated from MIT with a degree in electrical engineering. To this day, I love this. You said that you recall accompanying your family in the strawberry fields as a child and has a hard time believing that she's putting things into space right now. She's a passionate advocate for STEM and the co-founder of the National Latinas in STEM Foundation. She's also been awarded the Trailblazer Award by Silicon Valley Latino in 2019. In 2018, she was part of a digital project for the Anita Borg Grace Hopper Conference, where she was made into a hologram. That's pretty cool. She was featured as a New Guard of STEM Stars by Vanity Fair in 2016, named the Women in STEM honoree by Girl Start in 2016 as well, and a 2015 Women of Influence by the Silicon Valley Business Journal, and in 2014, a KQED Latina Local Hero, and one of the top 20 Latinos in tech by CNET. She's all, not Not just that, she's also been featured as a Latina leader by NBC Latino, Cosmo Latinas, Latino Leaders Magazine, and has had media appearances on Univision, PBS, BBC Radio, and she's been invited to speak at Harvard, MIT, and the White House. So, thank you. And we do have microphones. I tend to speak loudly, but we also do have microphones. So I'm going to start off with a couple of questions for the panelists, and then we can jump on and just kind of see where the conversation goes. And also add anything else you want to, your introduction or the career. But the first question I wanted to ask is, thinking back to when you were an entry-level engineer, when did you know that you were ready to take that first step into the first level of management? How did you recognize that? And when you started, do you think that was where you were going to start to take your career?
Do you mind if I take this up? Okay, so thinking back, first of all, I want to say it's been a half a century. So, but I do not recall that it was like a conscious decision for me to take that next level step. I recall being a single contributor, working on a project for Northrop. I performed well. I would be given various more difficult assignments that were more challenging. And, I was a good performer as an engineer, and I was rewarded by being given a management position, which is like, you have to ask yourself why that happens so often, but it does. And I was in a very big position. So I go from single contributor where I'm doing automated tests, do a project for electronic jamming on F-15 aircraft. I was responsible for some pretty cool things. And then I'm running a product line where I have engineers and techs and supply chain help and administrative help, and it's a big group, and that was like overnight. Yeah. So I was not
with no leadership training.
No, and I didn't have time to say, am I really ready for this? I knew I wasn't really ready for it, but it was a great opportunity, and I really needed to just do my very best. And my very best, I'm not exactly sure, how good I was. You'd have to ask people that I managed, but I would say that was not my only experience, just being thrust into a position like that.
Yeah, I think for me, it was actually very different experience, which I think it's great, right? That we're able to tell different perspectives. One is that I started performing well, right? I started getting more responsibility within my team and who I was working for. But I 5 years later, right? Like I started 5 years later, I looked up and I realized that a lot of the people that I was working with had been promoted, had moved on to do something different. And I felt like I was still kind of doing the same thing. And there was this awareness of what's happening? Why am I not getting other projects? Why am I still feeling like I'm doing the same work? And so it actually was this moment of realization and reflection where I had to go have a conversation with my manager, right? And I said, I want to know if there's a gap in performance or something is happening. And he was like, no, you're doing an exceptional job. I just thought you were just really happy doing the work that you're doing. And so there was this moment of I'm not just going to keep working and then you're going to give me a promotion and give me a new assignment. I have to tell you what I want and what I need. And we need to have more of these discussions during our yearly performances other than oh, you're doing great, keep at it, right? And so that to me was the moment where there was this shift. Mm-hmm. And I attribute some of that to me culturally, to how I was raised, right? I was raised in a very traditional Mexican household where I was taught to not really talk back to elders, to really respect authority, to not question things too much, and to be very grateful for the opportunities that I had. And in that moment, there was this realization of like, oh, that's not how it works, right? That's not really how all of this happens. And so it took that realization and that awareness for me to say like, oh, like I have to talk about what I want. And the thing was that you hear often like you have to advocate for your career, right? But you don't know like what that is if you've never seen it modeled. And so there's this moment where you're like, oh, advocating for my career means I need to tell people what I want or what I think I want and see like what gaps I maybe have and what support I may need, or how do I help bridge that? Or I need to go network within my organization to understand like what may be other opportunities outside of my work, my team here that I may be a good fit for that will help expand my skill set. And so for me, that was a moment. And then once I realized that, like things started happening, right? I became the manager of the near-field range a couple of months after that. And then it became kind of like every 2 to 3 years, I had this realization of, am I still being challenged? Do I still enjoy what I'm doing? Or do I need to do something different? And so that's led to like different opportunities and different roles around them.
Have you found it easier to advocate for yourself as you every couple of years? Or are you like almost relearning what that looks like at the new position?
It's a little bit like relearning because what worked before doesn't always work in the next step, right? There's also this awareness of how you performed and what you did at the level you were at isn't going to really translate to success or more growth at the next level. And that's also another thing I had to like figure out how to navigate and work through, right? And a lot of this has been self-taught or through mentors like Donna Potter, that's in the audience today, who's been great at providing feedback and who's been a great person that I've been able to talk through situations and say, hey, I'm seeing this, I think I should do this, like, what are your thoughts and how do I navigate through this? Because it gets more nuanced, like as you progress in your career, like the things you need to do and the things that you need to be aware of what not to do. That's the other part, right? And so you can't have some of these conversations sometimes very openly. So you need to find what I like to refer to as like your group of advisors you can bounce some of these ideas off of and get more feedback as to what you need to do strategically to the next step.
So you done? Has it been easier as you?
I would say, you know, I come from a different time. I just want to say I have some experiences that I don't think are topical today, but I mean, I remember getting the positions that first of all, being surprised. I was getting a position that I didn't think I was ready for, but they were ready to give to me and not getting the raise to go with it. Yeah. And not being, you know, sure that I should be articulating and complaining about it because I had no role. There were no other women in aerospace, in engineering to help me through this. And it seemed, it was a difficult time. And I would say it was 20 years of similar kind of experience where I would get the job and not the raise. And then the president would go, oh, you didn't get the raise? Oh, here, let me go fix that. I mean, it was somebody that floated down and kind of saved the day. But I don't think that happens anymore. Does that happen anymore?
Yes, it does.
It does still happen? Because that is what I have told others is that you should not let that happen. It happened to me a couple of times. Do not let it happen. Just be vocal about it and take that, you know, take that up as far as you need to go because it's not equitable. And we have to make sure that we are in an equitable situation or we will always be held back.
What do you think women can do to advocate for themselves or advocate for other women that they see too, like giving them that kind of advice?
Yeah, I have given that advice. I mean, I strongly feel like, you know, you have to share your experiences so that, you know, if others have, there are so many people who have very shared experience. So just talking about it, I think is very helpful. But if you see something, say something. I actually believe in being pretty vocal about these things. And especially as I get more mature in my career, I have no qualms about speaking up on this, but I know it was very hard for me early in my career, and I still think it's important.
Yeah, I think something that I've tried to do is as I get invited to be a part of interview panels for different roles, right? And if I see something happening with the dynamics of that interview that for whatever reason is attributing different requirements for the female interview than it is to the man, I'm like, wait a minute. Like you just stop and call it out and say, this isn't fair.
Yeah.
Are we realizing what we're doing, right? And then there's this awareness of like, oh, you're right. And then that really changes the dynamics of that, right? So I think when you're in a place or a spot where you have the ability to speak up and you feel comfortable, I think it really behooves us to do that in order to help support other women and help ensure that they're getting those promotions and they're getting those entry-level supervisory roles or directorate level positions as well, as we continue to increase the numbers in women in leadership roles.
We mentioned mentorship a little bit. Have you had mentors? Are you a mentor now? You know, where do you think that kind of fits in, either formally or informally, as you navigate your career?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate. Donna has been a mentor of mine for actually many years. She's somebody that to this day, as I'm thinking through new things, right? And I like to believe that in our relationship, there's been things that I've been able to offer as well. But I think one of the things that I've also realized that, again, something I had to work through myself was that I had to figure out how to build common ground with people that I didn't feel like I had a lot in common with. And that became such a big pivotal change for me, especially because in our industry, many of the people that are in positions that can actually enact change or influence or change things tend to be older white men, right? Mm-hmm. And so I had to get past the fact that I'm a woman of color. I tend to be oftentimes on the younger side, right? And how do I bridge that with the men that have been in the industry for so long? And what are the things that I need to kind of try to do to figure out how do I do that? And I actually learned that when I was in college, because I was very fortunate that my advisor was an ex-MIT president, which at that time I had no idea what that really meant, right? Until I was like, oh my goodness, he's an MIT president, an ex-MIT president. And originally, right, I was like, I have no idea like how I'm going to connect. And slowly we started talking about how we grew up and our families and our upbringings. And our upbringings were very similar. And so that allowed for this connection and this relationship building that becomes really important in mentorship relationships, especially as those potentially evolve into sponsorship, right? Because a mentor can give you guidance and you can bounce ideas off of them, but the sponsors are the ones that advocate for you when you're not in the room. And that can really help propel your career to a level that you're not even really aware of. And taking those relationships and seeing the transition from mentorship to sponsorship can be a crucial development in anyone's career.
Absolutely. I agree with that. So I was fortunate to have sponsors that were, that came to me and found that, I had something that they saw and they wanted to develop me both at my initial job at Teledyne and then at L'Oreal. And so the president of the company at L'Oreal, early president Bob Berry, took me as a special project, I'll call, and he really made sure that my career, was really full of challenges and successes and stepping stones to the next job. And he, I remember we just captured a big program and he said, I'm sending you to Japan and you just have to cut $200 million worth of subcontracts for all the companies you can find to do work for this project. That's all you have to do. Go. And then I got there and he called me and said, oh, and it's going to take about a month and a half. Do you want me to call your husband? Like my ex-husband. But I mean, I had people like that, and they'll forever be important to me. The casual mentorships, though, that I've gotten from other women in the industry and other people in the industry have been for the spot checks, the problems, working through, some particular experience I was going through that I could use as a sounding board. That was equally valuable. And I would say today there's this group of lovely ladies called the Satellite Ladies, and they're on the East Coast, and many of them are retired, but most of them were entrepreneurs and trailblazers and CEOs or senior executives of all the big companies you've heard of. They have this great group, and I'm part of it, and they're an invaluable resource for me. And I recommend, you create your own group, casual, other. But I do think that organic, mentorships that are just organic, just the kind that you connect with a person and you use those kind of resources. They work best for me, and I don't know about others.
Yeah, I agree. I think they tend to oftentimes bring a little bit of checks and balances, right? In terms of like, hey, I'm a whole person. Like my job, as great as it is, doesn't define all of who I am. I'm a spouse, I'm a mom. There's like different layers, right? And sometimes getting that feedback is just so grounding and so helpful as you're kind of trying to manage through different challenges in your daily life.
Yeah. You can find more common areas to get along with people. We talk a lot in women's circles, and especially when we talk about leadership, about imposter syndrome. Does everybody know what that is? So have you experienced that? And like, are there any tips and tricks that you've learned of how to navigate imposter syndrome? Is it just staring at yourself in the mirror and telling yourself you're great, or
That's what I do.
That's what you do?
No, actually, what I do is I think about all of those. I'm sorry, man. All that the CEOs, the really awful ones, the ones that have gotten so far, and all their flaws, and how you're better than that. And it's so easy to just like conjure that up in my head, going, well, I'm better than that. So that's how I got over it, but I like it every day.
I like that.
And you only have to be named an interim CEO to really have it. Because interim CEO means you're not the CEO, and therefore you are an imposter.
All the responsibility. None of the title.
Yeah, but I can get over it.
Yeah, I think for me, I've gotten better at like pushing back that imposter syndrome, right? I think earlier in my career it was harder because I did feel out of place, right? And I would look around and I'd be like, there's really not very many people like me. There's not very many women, but women of color were very sparse and in between. And then I think as I have progressed in my career, I'm able to talk myself down, right? And say like, I have accomplished, I have contributed, there's things that I have done that have been successful. There's a reason why I'm here. My input is valuable, right? Like the talking to yourself and telling yourself like what things you've done, what you've accomplished. And I know that some of these tips have probably been given in the past, but having a folder of your inbox where you've gotten kudos from people, right? Or recognition. Or keeping, like something that you were awarded for something, right? And just looking back at that and reminding yourself, like, other people have seen value in what I do, and I need to do the same thing for myself. When I was in college, I remember there was a conversation that I was having with somebody, and one of the things that they mentioned that is kind of how I've started working through some of this has been, when somebody talks bad about you, right? Your instinct is to defend yourself, to be defensive. And so why is it so natural for you to accept you down talking to yourself.
Mm.
It's like, if you imagine that it's somebody's voice, like you're like, no, you're wrong. You don't know anything about me. You don't know what I've been through. You don't know what I've accomplished. And that to me has been more of a tactical thing, along with keeping like an inbox of like, oh yeah, I've done all of these things, right? And reminding myself that my input is valuable and that there's a reason why I've been invited to do certain things or to lead certain projects or to be responsible for certain things.
That's great. I like those a lot. Don, you kind of brought up comparing yourself to men. Have you ever kind of known that for that promotion you're going up against a man, and maybe you've won that or won the promotion, you've gotten the promotion, and how have you navigated that dynamic?
Well, I do remember, again, most of my career promotions were just, they happened to me. I wasn't like applying. They just, the offer came, the call came, whatever. But there was a time I really wanted a promotion to a senior vice president while I was a vice president for, I think it was 12 years. And I knew there were other candidates. They were all men, of course. And I thought I knew who they were. And I kind of looked at, my background and theirs. And I thought, it was really going to be a tough call, but I was the insider in that I was with the company and these would be coming in from the outside. That's always hard. To me, that's a very hard situation because I always feel like the insider deserves it. And I did not get the job. It went to a very, very good friend of mine. And I got over that. I mean, he's literally a very good friend and was even before that. But it's hard. It is hard when you lose. I think I lost legitimately, so I can't really complain about it. But I really wanted that position, and it would have put me from one of the vice presidents to the C-suite. It was the difference, and it was just a hard one, but it was in my mid-career. So.
Yeah, I think this is often what's referred to as hitting the glass ceiling, right? When there's like a realization that you're applying to like more senior roles, and then somebody else gets it, and it's like people that people that you're friends with, and like you keep trying, and it continues to happen, right? And I think this is where, again, stepping back and being introspective of where do I want to go? Is it maybe time to pivot and do something different? Is it maybe time to go and explore different options? I think that can become a true reality point because, and I think some of the research shows this, right? That as women continue to progress, there is this sense of like, we're competing with like 5 or 6 other men. We're the only women that are going for these like more senior.
Because of the numbers in the pipeline, there's just more men, yeah.
Right. And so statistically, it's going to get harder for us to move up the corporate ladder, right? Because there's fewer of us, and there's more men. And I think a lot of it has to do also with the training that we get, right? Like expecting, I think some women to bridge some of these perceived gaps without like specific training or development is also unrealistic, and it's not setting us up for success, right? I've become more vocal about some of the things that I need, and as a result, I've been getting more specific training or things that I'm looking for. But that continues to be a struggle, right? And it continues to be harder as you're looking for those VP or senior VP or executive VP roles. Again, because statistically the numbers are kind of against us.
And like you said before, it's a different type of training.
Right.
It's a different skill set that you
Right.
have to learn to move up.
Right. And the expectations are different. The way that you maneuver, the things that are being looked at are also different. And also there's a perceived sense that somebody externally is going to bring some expertise that hasn't really been developed in-house, then it's more likely for somebody externally to get those roles, right? So I think there's a lot of that, and understanding honestly like where you sit on that and where you are, it just again brings a lot of clarity as to like what is it that I need to go do, and is this organization supporting me? And if not, then there's a lot of other organizations that may be able to do that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and specifically to that, what I needed to do after that experience was to go out and just test the waters and see, you know, if there were other jobs and other companies that would get me to that level, if there was some other position that had more of a challenge, because I had, you know, gotten to the point where it was 12 years kind of in the same position. So I did get offers. I didn't take them at that time. It was like 3 or 4 years later before I did, but it helped, you know, soothe the moment, knowing that I was.
It's the validation that
It
you
was a
needed, yeah.
validation, it was.
You both mentioned like jumping when you're not getting that promotion, and I've done that too in my career. How do companies foster, you know, promote women, do the right thing so that women don't get frustrated and feel like they have to go somewhere else in order to get that promotion? Are there things that you're implementing at your own companies, or things that you've seen, or even recommendations that you would make for company-wide, not necessarily for you individually?
I've seen, you know, the companies I've been with, some are better at it than others. Some have programs now that, you know, are really looking at diversity and you know, bringing that into the organization in a fulsome way with program. I'm with a virtual startup, even though we're a public company, so we're just looking for people to fill positions. So I don't think we're quite there yet, although I advocate for women to be in all the top positions if I could. We need more. Yeah, I would say that, you know, the Boeing company, for instance, I was with them, and they did, I thought, a fairly good job at the top of the company, and struggle a little bit in the middle. I think that's a common thing that I'm seeing. I think that's where we need to focus our efforts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think training, right? And it sounds very simple, but it's also very hard to correctly implement, right? I think that's part of the challenge, that training for people that are interested, from going from that individual contributor to like a frontline manager or a section manager or a department manager. Again, because the skill sets that you need to succeed in those roles are very different than what you're used to doing, right? And we need to be more clear and like, what are those gaps, and helping our organization support that. I know that Maxar is actually trying to do a lot of more in-house training that probably in the past wasn't as crystallized, both at the frontline manager level, but also at the senior level. I was part of one of their first cohorts for some of that professional development, and that's starting to change, right? There are more things though that I think we can continue to do for women though, right? I know that childcare, right, especially now as a mom, like childcare continues to be a challenge, and for women that have decided to have a family, and also statistically during the pandemic, right? Like so many more women left the working field because they were faced with childcare challenges. I think having honest conversations around that, I'm hopeful that hybrid models going forward in terms of working may open that possibility to be different. Also for dads, right? That are engaged and that want to be there for their kids, that don't want to miss out on being part of that development of their children. And then for people that don't want to have children, right, or that are having a family is not part of what they want to do, like how are we continuing to supplement some of their needs and some of the things that they want to do? right? And I think, again, it's looking holistically at all of these different things to ensure that our workforce is happy. They feel like they belong at work. They feel that they're a part and an integral part of the organization and the culture, and as a result, they're happier and they're more committed and feel more able and willing to be part of the organization.
With that, I'd like to open it up to, I'm sure everybody here has questions. Anybody want to start? Yeah, I will also check online. Nagar?
Yeah. So, thank you. That was very insightful. My question was, what do you think needs to be changed in childhood education in order to encourage more girls into becoming leaders as they are? Because I think that this problem starts really early on in childhood. I've experienced it personally with my own daughters. I mean, when they were 5, I was talking to John, who's my boss at the time. And I was just like, oh, okay, Don, thank you. And, you know, I hang up and I'm like, oh, she says, my daughter looks at me and she's like, your boss is a woman? How is that possible? Oh my God. You know, and this is a 5-year-old. So my question is, what do you guys think needs to be done at an early stage in order to encourage them to believe that they can be leaders in the future, to really strive for that? Because I think it's really, really early self-development. Is it the books we read to them, is it role models? I mean, there's like 50 different things. I'm curious to know your opinion.
Well, you know, full representation of women in all the different roles of life. I mean, we can't stereotype. I know they did when I was in school. I think, based on my younger children, I think we're doing a better job today, but I don't know about the early childhood education. What has changed from when my kids were in school? I now have grandkids who will be starting school soon, so I'm going to watch out for that, because I know you've told me about these great books about that the persist books. I think there are so many things for the early childhood education that we do wrong, that we have to be very careful about setting the stereotypes too early. What we need to do right to inspire them to go into more STEM related fields. I don't know. I'd love to hear your answer, Deanna.
Yeah, so I've actually have had the opportunity to do some more through the nonprofit work that I do, right, and K through 12 outreach. And actually there's research that shows that at 5th grade is when girls, for whatever reason, start hearing and internalizing that they're not good at math, or that math is not for them. So it starts actually, as you're pointing out, Nagar, pretty early in their development, right? And so what are we doing to combat some of that? Some of the things that we've recommended is some of it is actually just parents trying to be more engaged, right? I know, and as a mom of a toddler now, I know how hard it is. It's very easy to say, hey, take your kid to museums, hey, take them, do more STEM activities. But there's actually a lot of resources online in terms of like hands-on activities. Like kids respond so much to doing hands-on activities, whether it's buying a kit at Target that talks about how to build crystals, right? It's like 15, 20 bucks. And like you show them and they're fascinated, and you can talk to them about how that's chemistry or how that's math. Actually Legos, right? Legos actually, when they were created, they're the colors that you see, right, are the colors represented in the colors that exist. There's no really necessarily pink or different. And it was intended to be gender neutral, which is why it's like one of the best activities in terms of like activity blocks that you can do with your kids. You can be creative, you can build castles, you can build whatever it is, right? But again, it's part of that embracing that gender neutrality. There's a lot of there's been a huge movement recently around also just getting more ethnic representation in some toys, right? And embracing that and having that be part also of the development and engagement. And in terms of leadership, right? I think discussing and having open conversations like about kids being bossy, like boys and girls can both be bossy, right? And I've been very surprised and amazed at how receptive my toddler is, just like with every conversation. I talk to him like he's a little mini human, like he is a little mini human, but like a human little, like a mini version of me or his dad, right? And he is so open and receptive, and he'll like recite stuff that we've told him that we weren't really even sure that he was paying attention to. And so again, all of that, right? It's the messaging, the things that we talk, how we talk to our kids, the things we expose them. And the biggest thing that have noticed has been just the hands-on activities. They are so receptive to that in terms of just getting their hands dirty and seeing things actually happen. And that can be very transformational for them.
Yeah, I know you do the same thing, speaking at schools. I've done a couple of speaking at schools, and I want to do that because I want them to see a woman who's in aerospace, who's doing what I do. And there's little things like my college roommate is a woman of color, and I bought her daughter a book on Mae Jemison, and I wanted her to see Mae Jemison, not just like Sally Ride or any other, astronaut, so that she kind of saw that representation. Like there's little things like that I think that you can do for representation, but it is very sad that I think it's true that even with this generation at 5 years old, they're kind of getting these like gender normative like kind of messages. So, try to point out like, oh, there's a woman speaking on CNN about that topic. Like there's a woman who's an expert on, whether it's like political science or whatever it is, and just like slowly calling out that there's a woman who can do this, who can be an expert in all of these different things. We have a question online that I like. It's kind of a variation of what I asked. Have you ever had an experience going head to head with another woman for a position? And what was that like? We talked about going up against other men. But have you ever been in that situation in the pipeline?
Thank you.
We're on a big blank here.
Has lightning struck?
Isn't that sad? That's a sad commentary.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, no, definitely. I can't say that I recall, unfortunately. And actually, I have only had a woman boss once. And she was my boss only for, I think, 8-9 months.
Yeah.
All of my other bosses have been men. And I have yet to have a person of color who's been my boss, man or woman.
Yeah.
Same with me. I have never had a person.
Akash has diversity at the top. Both CEOs were men of color. So it was interesting because they had very, very different backgrounds as well and very different experiences. But I am struggling to think if I've ever had a woman as a leader.
Yeah.
And I'm drawing a blank. Any other questions from the audience? Yes.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say thank you for sharing all that you've shared. And I just want to ask, so me and maybe some others can get an example from you on how you pulled the woman up when you saw that she was supposed to be where she should be and it wasn't happening for her.
I'm sorry.
How you have helped a woman develop a career when she was stuck at a place where she shouldn't be stuck in. Like maybe she needed to go to the senior manager level and that just wasn't going to happen, but you made it happen.
Yes, so advocating for people's promotions. I do that wherever I see that necessary because, I'm in the room often when we're talking about who should be lifted up to the next position. And I'm currently advocating for that as well. So it's using my experience, my voice, my position as an officer of the company, as an executive of the company to, try to steer the conversation and steer the promotions and steer, some of that activity. That's what I've done internally. Sometimes though, I've been working with women who the only answer is, you need to leave, you need to go, and giving them that tough, advice, I think is good advice as well.
So you're finding resistance even at the C-suite in advocating for someone.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Especially there.
Yeah, I think for me, I have, I actually, when some positions are opening up that I think some women will be great for, I reach out to them and I say, you should consider applying. And I say, you should consider applying because you would be great for these reasons, right? Like I try to provide concrete, and some of those women have gone on and done that. And when I have been, the example that I gave earlier about a man and a woman and the perspectives or the criteria being slightly different was for a director level position for a woman that was basically the two finalists. And having that conversation actually based on just reassessing like what the criteria was, brought the woman to be promoted to a director level. And so, I mean, those are the things, right? Like those are the conversations and those are the moments that like as women that we have this ability and that we are in those conversations and that influence that we try to like lean forward and say like, this isn't fair. Let's reevaluate what we're doing. And then on the other spectrum, I nudge women and I'm like, hey, you should consider this. I think you'd be great. What is your next step? I think doing this would be really good for you, just as in terms of some of the visibility that I've been having as to what it could take for women to continue to be promoted.
There's a question in the back. Yes.
Yeah, thank you again for doing this to me and it's very inspiring. So I was wondering if there was a point in your career in which you wanted to start a non-company, and why, if you want to share, why you didn't do that, or what you did. Yeah. Thank you.
Every day. No, but it's all seriousness. I think I'm saving it for my retirement because I don't know. I've enjoyed the work I've been in, and I like being part of a big company. And now that I have been involved in taking a company public, it's hard work, and I think it's very individual. Some people, that's their thing, and I applaud it, and very impressed with all of that. But I haven't myself, except for goats and wine, and I have this vision I've been sharing with Nagar. She'll have the next door business.
Yeah, I think for me, what I ended up doing was start the nonprofit, right? And that's been like a national organization that actually next year will be 10 years. So I've grown that organization from the beginning, and it's a different type of financing and fundraising, right, than a startup, but also very similar in different ways. But in terms of my own like aerospace startup, I have thought about it. There have been some ideas that I've had, some considerations, but right now, for my personal life, I need a little bit more stability, and I think that's again a personal choice, right? And like what you gravitate towards, and like what you feel as something that you can do at the timing for you that's right.
I'm going to take one more question from online. I love this question. What is one thing you wish you had done differently? And the person puts in parentheses, I'm trying to avoid months and years of learning the hard way.
Oh, I think trust yourself more early on, because I think I found that I trust my gut, and it generally puts me in the right direction. But it took me a long time to get there. And I think you need to be true to yourself, but to trust your own sense, it's a good guide, I would say. And I don't think I had enough confidence to do that early in my career.
Yeah, following your intuition as a woman, like we tend to not always be right, but most of the time, so I'd say follow your intuition. But I think in addition to that is something that I mentioned earlier, right? Like having this self-assessment every 2 to 3 years of like, where am I? Am I still on where I thought I wanted? Is this still what I thought I wanted? Have things changed based on what I've learned? Because otherwise it can be 10 years, 15 years, and you're like, what happened? And so I think that to me has been super, super important and something I wish that I had done a bit earlier.
And I wish, like you, I wish I had realized how to advocate for myself earlier on in my career. It took me a very long time to realize
And
that
again,
I needed to advocate for
and
myself.
again, advocating is asking for what you want, right?
Very
Like, that's what it
clearly,
is. Like,
yeah.
I want this. Is it
How
going
do I get there?
And if
Will
I
you
don't
help
get it,
me?
I'm gonna leave.
Right.
Yeah.
Will you help me, right?
Yeah.
If not,
Yep. So with that, we're gonna stick around for a little bit longer, and our lovely panelists will still be here. Thank you again to everybody who joined online and everybody who joined here in person. And thank you again to AIAA for sponsoring this event and co-hosting today.
Thank you.
yeah.